Okay. Now we're good.
Okay. So we're live.
You're live.
Okay, terrific. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Thursday, October 23rd at 1:34 p.m. We just need to get all the way set up in here. Thank you for your patience. Kelly Lessons, member of the Anchorage School Board and chair of the Finance Committee, and to my left, we'll go around for introductions.
Pat Higgins, board member and committee members.
Aurora Cokerland, Senior Director of Finance.
Andy Ratliff, CFO. Jim Anderson, COO.
Tom Fenstep, Senior Director of Capital Planning and Construction.
Erica Sullivan, Executive Assistant.
Katie Parrott, Senior Director, OMB.
Corey Ace.
And online we have
Member Holloman.
member Holloman, and we will keep tabs on anyone else who may show up. I believe that member Bellamy is the other member of this committee, and she is at a conference right now. So we'll update as needed. We have 4 items on the agenda today, starting with the 2026 bond. And I wanted to take this opportunity to allow the administration to share any more they might want to share about the bond, and allow board members to potentially reflect on what to me felt like an open-ended ask at the work session a couple of weeks ago with respect to the Ursa Major question. And I don't know whether there was any clarity that you guys got during that conversation. So this seemed like an opportune moment.
Can you pull the slides up?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So while she's pulling up the slides, this is a much smaller slide deck, so we can focus on really the 1 or 2 things that we really want to know. And one of those is, we know that we have 50% bond debt reimbursement. We know it's the governor's last year to make modifications to anything that gets approved by the legislature. You know, what are we comfortable with? Because we know we're going to have this huge PR campaign that says this is for the taxpayer, the lowest impact on your taxes since 2014. And it's really, you know, if you go so big, we know that no matter what our outreach is, whether it's flyers, website, radio, every community council meetings, that there's going to be a huge part of the population that doesn't understand that in April. And as it gets enacted and we start reinforcing it over the next couple of years, I think people are going to finally get it that 50% of this is being paid for by the state. But I don't know the board's comfort zone. And then the second big one really to talk about is Ursa Major. And when we get to that, we'll talk about it, because you know there's certainly a long-term reason why we would rebuild Ursa Major, even if it costs us an additional $5.4 million. And we'll get to that slide and we'll talk through it. But for now, on the next slide, we'll talk about it again at the end, because I don't know who's online. I know.
Member Holloman.
And President Jacobs.
Okay, so we have 4, at least 4 of us can. We don't have to talk about it now. Like, what are your thoughts? I think at the end, though, as you see the other projects and we talk about Ursa Major, really the most relevant thing is, what are we comfortable with? I think if you threw $100 million out the first time, knowing that it's going to take a long time before the average voter really does understand what state bond debt reimbursement is, especially when people like me mess up and call it SBDR, and when I write it and they don't know, it's just going to be a lot. It's going to be an education opportunity. Everyone understood pretty quick when it went away, because the bond passed in April. They passed the legislation in June and backdated it to January. So that year in 2015, everybody knew what it meant. But since then, it's been so long that I think, you know, a lot of people just don't know. But certainly we can talk it now. We definitely want to close though with that being probably, if you were to give us guidance, the most important thing as we modify the non-action item for the next board meeting. We can talk about it again then. It's not unrealistic to expect amendments on the following board meeting. So we really have, several weeks to talk about this and think it through and kind of get an idea of how do we approach this now.
Yeah, in the past, we've gone different directions with this, right? At one time, we used to have components of different parts of bond, and we broke it out differently. So if we were trying to do something for a school, of course, that would be different. If we were trying to do something from a safety standpoint, if it was equipment, if we were to career technology, that bond passed in the upper 60%. That was a shocker. It wasn't for me, but it was a shocker to the administration. They didn't want the bond, but we got it through. Then the problem was you got the bonds approved this year, but if you don't get it approved next year, then you got all your staffing issues and how do you manage that? So they put all the bond together in one big one. So we either get it approved for 2 years and that gives us better planning to do things. That's when we started off with the 100 million kind of plus and went from there.
Yeah, I did some historical looking at it and it looked like towards the end of when there were 2 or 3 bonds, voters started saying, well, I'll support this one, but not this one.
That's right.
And I wasn't here, you were on the board actually when we switched to go back to everything on one bond.
Yeah.
So I can go by what George Michaelis remembered and others was that once people thought they really could still support the school district and approve 1 out of 3, and they're still doing good, and I assume it was the board working with the administration said, let's put it all in one package. And
the administration pushed it because they wanted to be able to project for 2 years worth of activities. And so staffing could be adjusted and they could, plan better that way. So they put the big bond together every other year was kind of like the approach.
Yeah.
What their plan was. And then that kind of, then it became one of the the municipality saying the assembly, we're not going to give you more than what you pay off. And we went to a bond.
Oh, that's who pushed that.
That's where it came from. Came from the municipality. There was some conservatives on the assembly. They were adamant, and they made a big point. You can't do more than what you pay off. Well, obviously, what we did 20 years ago is not going to cost the same as right now anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit ridiculous that way. And if we look at the total amount that we've got in bonds, it's come down a lot. So we've got a lot of sales, and we got $1.5 billion in deferred maintenance. We got all this other stuff, but we can break out issues. And we talked about this before. Energy efficiency. We save money if we just do some stuff. We may not even cost that much, but we got some things that will be very popular, and other things that can be clustered together, I think. So I'm not a supporter of keeping it, really small, and it's a problem that way. We're not being able to keep the schools up and to prevent massive repairs later.
Well, Tom did the math on if we were to want to stay exactly where we are right now. We keep all the same facilities, we keep them maintained at the level that we're able to maintain them at. It's $80 million a year, and that's not even eating into really that $1.5 billion. 80 million is like a steady state right now.
So this package is beneath that.
It is, but we do have this discussion on Ursa Major
Right.
that we
We'll
should
get
come to grips
closer.
with. And when we get to the Ursa Major slide, we've put a lot of thought into it. I'll be honest, initially we were not in the place that we got to once we started really looking at, if you could build a building with 80% of it paid off by the federal government, and we didn't need all 4 schools on base. None of them have been condemned. You could just give one back at 0 cost. If that's what the enrollment pattern would lead us to, and we'd have a building that's good for 30 years before it would need anything, really. So we want to leave room in here between 70 to 80 for that discussion, and then anything else that pops up. Because I knew Member Higgins was going to bring up some other things, and they're all legitimate. And we've talked a lot. It's just what is the upper limit we're comfortable with on the very first year of state bond debt reimbursement? Because I think you gotta go higher in the future.
I think
Or-
if you go with 100 million, you're gonna walk out. You break it out, you got a better chance, and you can sell the different components, but what we can't do is to break out locations of the municipality, because Eagle River will only vote for Eagle River. I'm sorry.
And that's what happened in the past.
That's right, we do not.
That's
wanna
why
break
it went
out
to one
Eagle
bond
River
and
direct.
everything.
So whatever we do with that, anything involving them has to be
Yeah.
municipal wide, or else we lose their votes. I mean, it's consistent, we've been there, I've heard comments at community council, well, we should be on our own anyway, why, we can do this, or we can do that, we don't have to worry about you.
It's like losing the Girdwood vote because they only have one school. You can't put them on every bond, and you know,
Although their students go to South and other choice
I know.
sort of
I
options,
know.
but, well, point well made. Okay, well, let's
Okay,
keep moving.
next slide.
So this is the 2026 bond. It's the year one, basically. Again, wanted to stress that it's a $74 million bond, but to the taxpayer, it's really a $34 or $37 million bond because of state bond debt reimbursement. The focus is pretty consistent with what we've done over the last couple of years. We're focusing on safety and security. So that includes 15 schools and a access control upgrade. It also includes renovating some of our older schools and bringing some of those deferred maintenance aspects of the school up to the current level that we expect in an educational facility. So that means we're gonna looking at upgrading roaming, Lake Otis, Platt Elementary, and that's got some specifically some seismic improvements that need to be made in the school structurally. Tudor is getting a secure vestibule in addition to its renovation. And then lastly, our student nutrition facility needs a bit of work to keep up with especially the increased load that student nutrition is providing for the district.
You know, it's interesting this year, we have about 800-ish less students. They're well over 100,000 more meals sold than this time last year. So all those things with the traditional service in elementary school was huge. I mean, every single school, they eat more and there's less trash, and they got to expand that environment to be able to produce more, and they're producing a different kind of food instead of all packing the tray with the little
It's 3.5 on it.
where the broccoli is cooked to the same temperature as the chicken. It's reconfiguration and improvement.
Me ask a question about, I recognize Tudor Elementary, group, I knew there were problems there, it never, came
Oh,
across.
yeah.
It's got issues.
You've been talking to me about that for 7 years.
Yeah, I have. But, it's only been 5, but that's okay.
It feels like.
It's 5. But the issue of the secure entrance kind of thing, they have right now, you go in through the door, you have to press the button, you get it released, and be able to go forward. What is the issue there, that how much is that gonna cost? Because it seems like that shouldn't be that high a crisis kind of situation.
Well, many of the early secure vestibules, we did the secure vestibule, but we didn't have the access control element, the open path system. So now you have a fob, basically, and use that fob to enter into the building. All the buildings are either real close to having a secure vestibule where you enter through the first set of doors after being buzzed in, and then you enter into the main office where you use the visitor management system, and then you're allowed to enter into the main school area. With these secure vestibule access control upgrades, where we didn't have access control, we didn't have the fob system at multiple different entrances, let's say at the staff entrance.
So it's
where we
not
have the
just the
fob.
front.
Yeah, if you go into my office as you walk through my office door, which you're familiar with, on the right-hand side up against the wall, there's this, it's about this thick, 1.5 inch thick, whiteboard. And it looks like it has a lot of bullet holes because APD shot it with every kind of round they had. And we put bulletproof panels in there, so in glass that's reinforced, so everyone in the office is safe. We've only had one incident, but we did have one where 2 adults were in a parking lot. One shot the other one. The injured man made it through the first vestibule, but no one in the office knew that he was safe at that point. It was pretty chaotic. But because they were able to lock it down, the other guy kept trying to get in, but he couldn't get in, and APD got there in time and saved the guy's life and protected the school. So the secure vestibules that we've done in the last 8 or 9 years are significantly different than some of the initial controlled entry, which is a little different.
But what's 2 things that are missing, what the issues here? One is, are we putting anything into that? Because that school is a disaster. And it seems like we should be putting something in there to get the player prepared for the rookie leaks, for the ventilation.
Is it Bartlett?
Yeah.
Bartlett.
Oh, Bartlett.
Bartlett.
Well, they're doing the designs now, and then the designs will inform us as to the costs. What do you normally weigh,
approved them.
65 or more?
Yeah, for the final estimate, but Bartlett itself, you'll see on the overall 6-year CIP, there's 2 different additional phases. So it's gonna get a lot of work. It's
Because
not
overall, it's like a $75 million
Yes.
project. That's the number.
Over probably 10
Over
years.
many years,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the last
So
one is,
Bartlett's on 2027 through 2029.
and that is absolutely, the administration, the municipality has not told us anything in writing or anything else that they want at the blue level, in the future.
There's been nothing official, only comments at joint assembly meetings by really a couple of assembly members. And then one board member has mentioned discussions with the assembly, but
So assuming that Lake Otis is not closed, what is there plans or is there a contingency or what you're going to do?
and I built a slide to talk about that. And
Okay, well
and
then
so-
I'm ahead of the game.
another reason that we put this headroom for discussion purposes is because every decision the board makes, regardless of what the decision is, there is an impact. So if on the 18th of November, the board doesn't close Lake Otis, then I'm hoping that, and we're trying to get a cost estimate. I'm hoping that there would be an amendment to get Abbott Loop up to a standard that is acceptable for many years. It won't be a full renovation, it won't be a $30 million bond, but everything that really would have to be done, because that's the impact. I mean, it's not personal if Lake Otis closes or not to me. It's making sure the board understands if we don't close it, then we have another project that we need to add to this bond because we need to start getting the design going. If we do close Lake Otis in November, knowing that there's a bond project to renovate that building, we still wouldn't want them to move in next year because we can get the renovation done much quicker if there's no one in the building while you're doing it. It's like any DIY project at home. It's a lot easier when no one's in the house. So whichever way the board does vote on Lake Otis, both ways do impact other follow-on decisions.
Hold on, Member Higgins, I know that Member Jacobs has a question, if we could pivot to that, and then also just be mindful of a number of items on the agenda and getting through this one.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Can I first just confirm the year 1 2026 slide we're looking at is what's currently in our CIP, or is this new information?
The only difference was that 200,000 that we added.
Oh, he's talking about from last year's CIP. Is all of the year twos last year, what is the change? Is that what you're saying, Carl, or are you
Correct,
saying?
yes. How much of that changed from last year's CIP?
President Jacobs, I remember asking specifically a series of questions about those differences in the work session, and there were a number of changes
The-
that the administration reviewed.
Like we intentionally put the SBU for tutor. While you're already doing a renovation, it's much cheaper to do both at once instead of, and the trust, we didn't know about the trust structural issue at tutor last year because we found out this summer.
The Roman cost had gone down because you actually broke it into two projects.
right.
That was a big difference.
We
Okay.
had to break it into two phases. You know, a lot of it is we've definitely seen the lack of personnel available to do construction in Anchorage. And in some trades, it's even more, especially those trades where there's not a great deal of union workers available, like trim carpentry. Every single SBU was delayed this year. Everyone knows, once you do a CWA, you can only get the labor from the union shop, right? So you go to the hall, and if none of the non-unions signed up at the hall to pay the fee rates, then you can keep going back like we did this year, looking for trim carpenters. They're just not there, but you've already done the contract, so it is what it is. But it delayed it by probably 2 months. But it's the other thing is this is not anti-CWA. What the other impact is, there's so much construction in Anchorage and not enough people to do it all, that if you don't want to sign on to a CWA, there's enough projects now. You don't need us anymore. And it's just business. Everyone's competing for the same limited workforce.
And if we don't expand that workforce, it'll always be
Right.
that way. So the
I
SCWA
know.
is expanding the workforce. Just-
So
just for clarification.
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to interrupt and get to my question.
Yes,
So understanding that the differences are significant, but not a major overhaul. I was curious if Lake Otis was a new addition or if it was previously on the CIP, and it was my recollection it was on the
Yeah.
CIP.
We planned Lake Otis already.
Lake Otis has been on
Right.
the CIP for
5
years.
Wonderful. Okay, so again, my question. Since this document contained Lake Otis before the recommendation to repurpose Lake Otis for a charter program,
Absolutely.
what I think I understand is ASD doesn't have a significant past practice regarding how it handles capital investment in a district or a municipal owned school building that's occupied by a charter program. I think that there was one, which may have been Aquarium, that was handled previously, that was put on a school bond.
Yes.
And so this would be, if Lake Otis was repurposed, potentially precedent setting, or at least more recently precedent setting. And so is administration, if the building is repurposed as administration suggesting, is it comfortable with the current prioritization level of Lake Otis Elementary? Do we want to keep it in that spot? Should the programming change from a neighborhood school to a immersion charter program?
I'm comfortable. I mean, once we already picked a charter school and said, we are now going to treat all students as, I mean, we always treated all students as ASD students. But once we did a bond for Aquarian, I think, and we really are in more of a landlord mode when a charter school moves in than anything else. So Rick Ashulo's at Abbott Loop. If Lake Otis doesn't close, we need to fix up Abbott Loop. If we fix up Abbott Loop, they certainly don't have the fund balance to do it. We would need to bond for that. I think the years where people could save fund balance and grow, other than potentially if you're a homeschool program with very limited capital requirements, those days have passed. I mean, we just didn't keep up with funding.
If I could just
Okay.
interject, President Jacobs, as a reference point, I was an active participant in preparing the 2022 bond. We reinserted the Lake Otis project, which at that point was under $13 million as a building life extension to that bond package, and it focused on special education spaces, lighting, the playground, the roof, exterior doors and windows, HVAC, the water system, sanitary system. Those were things that were known issues for 5 years ago.
Right,
So the building itself is if it's going to remain an ASD facility,
right. I mean, if the
has needed
board,
these upgrades.
Yes, this predominantly represents the deferred maintenance on the building over the last 10 years or so.
So, Madam Chair, could I follow up just really
Please.
quickly?
Yeah,
Where I was getting with the kind of those two questions is as follows. If we're going to, and I think it does make sense that, you know, all charter schools are public schools and all Rilke students or all Aquarian students are ASD students. And so I think it tracks that if they occupy an ASD building, we should prioritize capital investments where it's needed to safeguard municipal property and not prioritize a building based on what program it houses, as long as there are students there. The one caveat I would add to that is I expect and I hope and I will force a board vote if needed to ensure administration continues to hold charter programs accountable for ensuring that we're examining of how we can break down the barriers of access, which include transportation and, for some programs, meal service. And if we're going to make it a formal practice that all buildings are equal regardless of what program is housed, I think that's probably a pretty good time when that precedent is being formally set to start having those or continue having those conversations. And so I'll leave it there for now, but I'm just providing administration a heads up that that's of interest to me.
you know,
Thank you.
Carl, if you think about it, Carl, we put $3.5 million into Lake Hood this summer to give them a brand new SBU. Not because, I mean, we're not going to go to Alaska Native and say, I mean, they need an SBU. Those are our kids. We got to protect them, just like we did with Aquarian, just like we did with Stream. I mean, I think we've passed that point where it's absurdly strange that a charter school would be in a brick and mortar building. I think those days are gone. You know, if we could have found a place and we are trying to figure out what is the future for schools like Highland and how do you put that in the next year and how do we talk about helping them and other charter schools. The Valley is building a charter school academy type complex. You know, I think once we all say they're all our kids, then they're all our kids, and you know, we do what we can, because the BSA was never designed to provide capital money ever. From the very first day it was written, that's why state bond debt reimbursement existed, was because bonds and state bond debt reimbursement were capital. Everything in the general fund was for instruction and running the operation of the school. So I don't think it's weird or odd. It's just, and I don't know why for years, Pat would know, I'm sure there were discussions, but I don't know why it 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it was so odd to bond for a charter school.
It was an administration commitment. The administration was not fond of charter school. And from the superintendent's standpoint, if they want to be on their own, they can do, they won't find their own damn place. And that's almost a direct quote, okay? So you had this, if they want to be on their own, they don't want to be part of us, they don't want to do this, they want to go off on their own, they let them do it. They didn't provide oversight. So we had mismanagement financially of what they were doing as well, but nobody was looking at that. And so it got out of hand with that. It was like, you know, you're like a publicly paid private school. Is the way they treated it. And so they didn't care about the facility. I disagreed with that strongly, obviously, and I disagreed with it today, and I've been vocal about it. But that's really what was going on. It was the charter schools were not managing their funds right. We had issues of buying religious stuff or contracting out private, you name it, in violation of the Constitution. We had finances where they were shifting money off to the PTA. Large amounts of money where the PTA would rent the place and rent it to the facility, to the charter school, and keep the money separate so they could spend it any way they want without oversight, or the principal being paid to do clean up the yard and getting the extra money that way. There's a lot of stuff that took place. On the board that the APA wanted to get paid for developing IT stuff that they were buying. Okay, So it was really nasty, and that's where we're at. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
thank you for,
You got me
a
on.
lot of historical memory. I do want to really respect folks' time, and we have a very full agenda. So let's,
Okay.
keep
Next
moving
slide.
forward.
Oh, and also the Betty Davis East was because the electric company only owned it up to the corner of the street. And now they're gonna replace that whole length of power, and now they'll be able to maintain it and repair it.
I did notice the $300,000 increase in the planning and design from our last briefing, just very briefly.
We put that for, as part of right sizing, if schools get closed, and we start moving programs around, we'll need some design funds to be able to make sure the projects probably won't be bondable level projects, but we will need design money. So we can make sure that we're ready by first day of school next year.
Thank you. Okay,
So one of the things we want to talk about today is first a major discussion. We found PCBs in the building. It's gonna cost approximately, just under $6 million to dispose of those PCBs. That wasn't included in the budget, and it doesn't fall under the reimbursable monies from the federal government to do that. So basically, we're looking at, we've already put forth $11 million. There's $41 million that the federal government is still willing to match to build this school. The decision is providing the additional almost $6 million to move forward with the demolition and disposal of the old school and get ready to build the new school.
I have some initial thoughts. And I think initially it's tempting to think about leveraging $10 million to help offset the deficit that we are staring at. That was sort of the initial thinking.
Same here. I thought
Right.
the same thing.
It is absolutely a direct way to help shore up some of that projected $75 million deficit. However, if the district may eventually be responsible
We will.
we will be responsible for the full cost, there's not a lot of money then that we're actually saving. And
Right.
thinking about the importance of Alaska in terms of global security, and quite frankly, thinking about the realities of climate change. I'm not a military expert, but it does seem to me that Anchorage is positioned to have a strong military presence
Oh, yeah.
for the foreseeable future. And
And that 8.5 is gonna be 10 million in a year
by
and
the
a half.
time, yeah, with inflation. So my personal inclination after thinking about this is to support adding that $5.4 million to the bond and continuing to move forward with putting Ursa Major on the bond. And I haven't spoken to the board members about it, but that is a bit of the evolution of my own personal thinking, and I wanted, this is an
Do you have
opportunity
any
for other board
concerns
members.
about it? Because it sounds good to me.
Carl?
I'm sorry, was there a question asked of me?
This is essentially an
We have to
open,
vote.
open mic, opportunity to share any thoughts you have. Mr. Anderson and the team at our work session a couple weeks ago indicated their interest in understanding board members' thoughts about adding the Ursa Major demolition to the bond.
I
And
see.
there was no resolution or thoughts publicly shared at that time.
Does the additional 5.4 million, is that subject to an 80-20 split as well, or is this money we have to 100% add to the total cost of the project?
It would be 100% added to the total cost. If all of the other schools on Jaber also qualify for this same program, if it exists when we get to that point. If we had known that this school was contaminated with PCBs when we put in for the grant, then it would have been part of the budget, and then it would have. For the other three schools, Tom already has people going through the schools. There's a contract, and they are determining, do they have the same level of PCB usage within those buildings So we will know in the future if there's ever an effort to try to replace one of the other three schools with an 80-20 match.
Good data point.
Thank you. Madam Chair, could I ask a quick question?
Please.
So I guess the other question I have is regarding, I mean, I don't have an opinion right now. I understand it seems to be a modest investment and a significant match from the federal government, which is why I was a strong advocate initially. I am interested in hearing administration's position on where we are with enrollment and what our ability to serve the J-Bear community would be without that school, without adding that school back into our portfolio. What I think I understand is we're serving all those students comfortably now. And while we don't know what's going to happen in the future, I think I understand that we would be adding potentially another under-resourced school to the rotation if we split up base families into an extra building. And so I'm curious what that looks like with the budget situation, how students could be negatively impacted while the state addresses foundation formula funding adequacy, and whether or not enrollment continues to bear out the fact that we want to add another building in this section of the MOA.
Well, unlike the bulk of Anchorage's schools, even by the deed capacity and the ASD capacity, not by classrooms, they're still well into the upper 70s and 80s in terms of capacity. They also, though, are seeing the same things we see in every school, with putting programs for students with more needs than others and much smaller people per class and things like that. The whole capacity percentage, I'm very hopeful that in the next several months, we can change the way we all see the actual capacity within a school, as opposed to a percentage by the 114 square feet for an elementary school. I also, I said it earlier, but probably not very clearly, if you rebuild this school and if J-Bear does start having a decline in enrollment, it gives us a very simple, easy solution to just release one of the other schools on base. If it got low enough. Right now, it would be packed like sardines if you did that. But you could release that building that has not been condemned, like Ursa Major was, back to J-Bear. They could use it for any military purpose that they wanted, or community purpose, and it wouldn't cost us anything to give it back. We wouldn't have the $8.5 million for demo. It wouldn't be demoed. They're perfectly functional if we thought we didn't need it. So, you know, it definitely gives us more flexibility for future decisions in almost every way. And this $8.5 million right now, it will be 10 million in a year and a half. So if we're looking at trying to capture that 10 million for just next school year, by the end of next school year, we're going to owe 10. And I don't know, the math doesn't seem to work. But my first gut feel was to give it up until J-Bear lawyers came back and demonstrated that it's our cost either way. We pay less to do a bond and build a new school than we're going to pay to demo.
I think the other important thing to consider is, if populations do go down, you can always move like population of Ursa Minor and Ursa Major into Ursa Major, and taking into account that Ursa Minor, Aurora, Orion also scored highly under the PMSI program.
That's the Department of
The
Defense
DoD one,
program.
right?
Yes, that's what, so they could potentially get a grant and we could renovate, let's say, Ursa Minor, while we're housing all our students in Ursa Major.
Sure. It becomes a nimble piece of the.
They're always going to be
Yeah.
our cheapest schools in the district.
Hold on, I know that member
Public schools
Jacobs
and military
has a
installations.
question, and then hopefully we can wind down conversation here and pivot to one of the next items on the agenda.
Public schools on military installations.
Thank you. Member Jacobs? Did
Yeah,
have a
thank you.
question?
So yeah, just one last question on this topic. This additional funding, is this something that we could potentially seek to get from the state through the project waterfall, or through just a direct appropriation in the capital budget? whether or not we make the initial investment ourselves, it would seem to me that this would be something that would be looked on pretty favorably from the legislature's view. This is a $5.4 million investment that serves military families. The Anchorage School District and the municipality have already put in a significant amount of the funding. We've achieved a federal match. And, for this cost, the legislature could serve, a core key constituency within the MOA and within the state. And so I wouldn't think it would be a huge uphill lift, but I guess I'm interested in feedback.
I think, in the last, I don't know, half a dozen plus years, I've seen almost every line item that comes to ASD get vetoed. I mean, that's just a fact. I think the representatives that would maybe be the easiest to sway to put it into legislation are probably ones who also have had some of their bills vetoed more frequently than others. I think I don't know. I think a bond, you know if you have it or not. As we saw last year, we didn't really know until right before school started how much money we had. When you look at the major maintenance grants that used to be plentiful over the last several years, a lot of those have been vetoed down to very small amounts because of the state's budget difficulties in prioritizing education facilities. So we just haven't been all that successful in the recent past at getting additional capital money. That's my concern.
Very fair. Member Jacobs, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no, I everything Mr. Anderson said is correct. The reason why I asked the question is because this is very much unlike anything we would have ever put forward. A 20-80 split with a small additional capital investment required that exists on a military base that our state, proudly supports for very good reasons. And so I would think if any project could get approved and escape a line item veto, it would be this one. And so, we have $1 billion in deferred maintenance. I feel like these are the questions we're obligated to ask. And so I understand why administration is leaning towards a bond. I just want to make sure we're looking down all the different pathways before we get started. Thanks.
Well, if you look at the timeline, Carl, if you put it on the bond, in April that you can start demo in May. If you wait for legislation, you may not know until 30 June, and then you're waiting for an override, and you're not going to probably do demo next summer. It's going to push it an entire another year.
All right. Member Jacobs, I really, out of respect for everyone's time, if we could have 30 more seconds on the bond question and then pivot.
Oh, Madam Chair, that's all I had. That's all I had. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure we'll continue more conversations at the board level. Any final bond item?
Nope.
Slides? Okay, this is the last slide. Oh, discussion.
We talked about
Yes. That that we would
really
need an amendment.
every decision has an impact, and that decision has an impact, and
But the cost estimate is being developed, is what it sounded like.
yes. We know that trying to run it as a standalone water or fire suppression is not gonna work.
Okay.
We didn't get a single bidder last time.
When does the administration expect that the cost estimate for an Abbott Loop renovation would?
We'll have a rough estimate on the, we'll have it before the vote on the 18th.
Before the 18th. Okay,
And obviously, we'll make sure we share that information.
great, thank you. Okay, I am preemptively going to request that we extend this meeting until 2:45 to allow us a fighting chance of getting through some of the other items if folks need to leave. I understand the second item on the agenda is Western Alaska Relief, and I think that's still in Mr. Anderson's report.
It is. I'll provide a quick overview of where we stand on, figuring out the funding piece of it. Just yesterday, the state received the federal government's approval that it is a disaster relief, and they set aside X amount of dollars. So the state is working right now. We may have it tomorrow. It very likely is going to be Monday, though. How to break out what would be reimbursable by state, what would be reimbursable by the federal government, and what might the paths be to provide the information, and what are the requirements to get those reimbursable. We have a meeting with Dr. Bishop and her all of her key staff, all of the chiefs, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and Katie. Just make sure you know. And we're gonna go through all of those internal things because we have a lot of stuff that is complicated, and we're trying to work through the mechanics of how to do it. And I'll just use, there's 33 kids that qualify for pre-K. We can't do the special ed testing on them to see if they qualify for special ed because they're still in trauma. Many don't speak English. This is going to take a long time to get that. We know that Deed has told us they're going to give us full ADM, but there's a difference on ADM for Gen Ed pre-K, which is 0.5 FTE, and SPED pre-K, which is 1.0. And then there's a host of other things that we have to talk about with the Deed staff, because that's a third really angle and direction to get funding. And it's a completely different kind of funding because Dr. Bishop has access to other federal monies that the state has. And so we know that we have a little bit of work. I would think in the next couple of weeks, all of that will be cleaned up because no matter what they talk to us about today, and even at the state EOC, they're going to have to send all of their documents through legal and make sure everything is just right dressed before Annie and Katie get it, and then we'll clean everything up. We almost finalized, I think, well, after we talk to Deed, we'll be able to finalize what levels are they willing to track, because if we track everybody's costs for everything they did, only to find out that some of it's not going to be reimbursable at all because it was during the duty day or for some other reason, then any cost number I would give you would not be the cost number we give you in 2 weeks. And that always creates confusion. So we prefer not to really give it out because we've got things like we sent 2 containers with enough shelter supplies for 1,000 each, but we don't know what the Red Cross has actually used. And we won't know until we get those containers back and do an inventory. And then we know we'll get reimbursed for everything that they actually use. And those are both sitting over by the Egan Center. They had to empty them because there's a lot of places in town where you don't want to leave a container out. So we know all of the supplies are in the building. We just would have no idea what's being used. So we need a couple weeks to feel more comfortable that any number we put out there is not going to be changed within 12 hours. We do know there was over 180 hours of instructional staff alone. Well, that's IT as well, not counting bus drivers. Staff efforts over 180 hours last night have been put into supporting this. Dozens and dozens and dozens of buses at $125 an hour to operate. So we use buses for the airport, obviously, showers, because the Egan Center had no showers initially. Alaska Airlines didn't have enough showers, and many people hadn't taken one in days. They'd been, in transit. Laundromats signed up to do laundry for free, so we sent buses to take people to go get their clothes clean. We took them to gymnasiums so they could get out of this really hectic, chaotic environment and go play basketball or do what they wanted. And we've also, there was a potluck over at Egan where we moved the Alaska Airlines community over there so they could, really just get a mental break. And then the schools, as of Monday, we already had buses lined up to take them to Betty Davis East Anchorage High School, Wendler, College Gate, and CCS. And as students find places with family members around town, they are enrolling in other schools as well. And CIT is working that piece. So CIT is working crazy hours, making sure everybody who stayed at the sites, at the 2 shelter sites, and those who immediately left as soon as the bus dropped them off with family members, trying to make sure we get everybody enrolled. And you can imagine with no phone numbers that takes a little time once they've left the shelter site. we've sent registration teams to the shelter sites to direct work with the family members on the ground. Sven and all the instructional folks figured out a new way to enroll the kids. So it was expedited for those who had nothing. They had no ID, no forwarding address, no anything. And so they were incredibly successful at doing that. We have had translators with the registration teams. They've also been translating documents for ASD, also the American Red Cross and FEMA, because American Red Cross and FEMA had experiences where they had gone somewhere and used Google Translate or whatever to try to get signs made, only to find out that that created more problems. So Sven has been talking to the LKSD, Lower Kuskokwim School District, multiple times a day since we started. Most of our staff has talked to them. Marty has reached out to them. So we've got great comms with them. In fact, this afternoon, their assistant superintendent's on the ground with some staff members, and I think our communication with them, we were their source of communication on what's happening in Anchorage the first several days, because we were here. Obviously, comms, shelter container. I will hand over to Marty for how we're going to work personnel who are working in our schools but don't work for us.
Yeah, have to kind of brief the board on that. So yesterday, Sven and I actually took a tour of those 4 sites that have enrolled the largest number of kids. And we were able to pick up Lori Russell, who was an administrator, the principal from Quig, who was here in Anchorage, and have her tag along with us so they could get a visualization to where a lot of their kids had landed. And boy, that was powerful. It's really cool to see how all 4 of those schools have just embraced that effort. But we've been having regular conversations with their deputy superintendent and director of HR just about how they might be able to move staff here and then to support those kids. So to the greatest extent possible, now that we've congregated them in a small number of schools, can we congregate them in classrooms that keep those groups together and then provide a staff member from LKSD so they just have the greatest chance of having some continuity from what they lost when they were displaced from their community. And so the agreement that we have worked out through the attorneys is we will enroll the students. They will be ASD students for all intents and purposes. And then LKSD, where possible, will dispatch staff and house them here in Anchorage. And they will remain LKSD employees, but they will work in those schools where we have those high concentration of former LKSD students. And the reason for that arrangement, we kind of landed on pretty early on, is this situation is going to be dynamic and it's going to change a lot over the next couple of months, right? We may have an influx still of more students. We may have students who are enrolled with us for a while, but then a lot of them, when they have the opportunity, may move to Bethel or another community in Western Alaska. And so that allows LKSD to sort of bend and flex with the enrollment fluctuations around those students. And, you know, enrolling students from one district to another is not particularly problematic. Ending one person's employment relationship with an entity and starting it anew with another, you know, it's different collective bargaining agreements, it's different leave accruals, it's different, you know, it's just a lot of differences. And so this allows their staff to experience really the least disruption as possible to help them, you know, get their feet under them and then be able to support their kids who are here in Anchorage. So we think we've got a good mutually working relationship and agreement around that. And so we're pretty excited to start to receive some staff from LKSD and support those kids.
Great. Well, I appreciate everything that the administration and the staff members are doing. And maybe this is just an open invitation for future finance meetings to have Western Alaska updates sort of as a recurring agenda topic to update the board as needed.
Unfortunately, I mean, IT, this was a whole team effort, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's everybody 7 days a week, really, the first week. So all the students will be able to be tracked by where they came from. You know, you hear a lot about Kipnick and Quig and as the two main villages, but there's actually students from 5 or 6 villages here. Some of them were here for AFN, only to find out they couldn't go home.
Yeah.
So it's every variant of everything to get your head wrapped around it. And yeah, it's been an amazing team building effort. Yeah, it's been good.
Thank you. I know many of us talked about it at the board meeting, but it is impressive. I'm going to pivot to the fourth item on our agenda out of respect for time, which is FY27 budget planning.
Okay.
And then maybe we can circle back to that because we'll address that in another board meeting if we can't fully get to it today.
Okay.
So this is agenda item 4 that we're moving up to number 3.
Yep, and really kind of wanted to focus on how we're gonna do the community engagement for our 27 budget. We're spinning up this balancing act software simulation that we did and we started doing it last year. I'm gonna make a few changes to it, one being that not allow changes to revenue categories where people can't just make up revenue that they think we should have. And really get the public and whoever uses this tool to balance the budget the same way that we're gonna have to go do it. That's kind of one of the biggest changes. A couple of the things that we did put in, and we're still kind of finalizing these numbers, so this isn't a public facing thing yet. Really just, it'll be the same, similar opening statement and everything. And really kind of the goal is to get more people involved in it. And then at the end, in December, when we had the board work session where we went through it and had everyone kind of fill this out. The idea would be to have a more robust community engagement in with, the legislature, the assembly, DEED, governor, whoever we can invite media to come and play with this and see if they have the ability to balance it as well. And if they do, what would they cut? But really force them to get to a balanced budget to see what they would cut to be able to get there and see the challenges that we're having.
So I realize this is internal beta testing right now, but I see a $78 million deficit rather than 75 point something.
Right, and that's, as we get further into this and see what, I think maybe healthcare is like a driver of that. It's our increases in that are above the 3 or 4% average that we used when we're kind of doing those really rough estimates to begin with. And again, one of the problems with pushing this out early, this is probably change again as we finalize our revenue, because I don't know how many kids we're gonna have still, because we're enrolling all these kids from Western Alaska, doing our intensive needs count. So there's still a lot of stuff in flux. So this will probably change again, but it's in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
If our difference was only 3 million, really, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
So one thing I tried to do is tie a BSA equivalent to that 78 million, but I haven't got the software to actually work for me yet. So a couple of changes that I've made. By and large, the categories are all the same. One thing we did include was we have for 27, we'll have 4 contracts that are going to be unsettled at that time. So we have built in a 3% or so increase in our wage scales and $150 in our health insurance. So we put some toggles on here. So if you want a 1% increase in wages for those groups, here's how much it adds. And you can see that deficit go up as you add those percentages. So there is some that's already built in. It'll be described. It's described in the notes here if you click in it, and we'll add more information as we go, but just kind of want to get this in front of the board, just to make sure we're kind of on the right path if there's anything else you want. Similar with insurance, $100 per member per month, the change that does, across the entire bargaining units in effect. So that's one big thing that we put in there, like a new thing, just because that's top of mind, frankly, is what that effect has on our deficit. The other thing I updated was on the class size, and start calling it as a class size versus a PTR, because a lot of people don't necessarily maybe understand the full terminology of PTR versus class size. Our PTR is closer to a class size than others who might have all their certified staff divided into the number of students, including like their specialists and stuff.
So I'm interested in this because it looks like you've given a bit of a ballpark for the additional cost of implementing the evidence-based model the Pike-Azog model. Member Higgins, are you paying attention?
The one,
So,
So on the balancing act software,
I know.
he's incorporated the evidence-based model, the cost to implement that. And so I think that was a question that arose
Yeah.
over the last month, like what would that updated figure look like?
right.
And so that is over and, the cost over and above of maintaining, where we are now.
That's, from where we are
Balancing
now
the
to get to
deficit
15 in
and-
K3 and 25 for
Yeah.
12.
And that doesn't include the money it takes to be able to recruit and retain teachers as well.
No, that's just purely the staff cost.
Yeah, that's assuming we can
There's
hire
a
all the
question
people
from
that way.
behind Mr. Ace.
Hey, Andy, for the plus PTRs or minus PTRs, can you add what that would do for FTE or like the number of positions that would be lost so that people have context around that? Because I mean, you look at that and
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I have the right context. I can make a guess, but
The challenge is
Um,
it ties to it being only teachers that would be cut, which wouldn't be unrealistic.
Well, in the PTR, it would be.
Right,
Um,
but the other impacts on parapros and other stuff as those classes go away.
I think then you should clarify that this is
So we-
just for, classroom educators or something like that. You know what I mean? Certificated educators or, I just think it gives context. People don't really appreciate what that means.
We could see if there's a spot to put in the FTE, because when we have that, it's,
I wouldn't use, I don't know if I'd use the word FTE because that also gets confusing, but just, I'll let you think
Yeah.
about it. I mean, just some context around what that means in terms of a reduction of staff. And you guys can,
yeah, we'll see how we could probably work it in on there, but that was kind of one of the changes, to add that Senate Bill 57 target and the evidence-based model targets. So,
And that's not a multiple choice option. I mean, you can either choose evidence-based model or the Senate Bill 57 model. I mean,
right, yeah, because they're different calculations.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can only choose one.
Okay.
But the evidence, the Senate Bill 57 is fairly close to like a PTR -3, so 3 less kids in every class.
The Senate one is, if I see this is 23 at grades through K through 6, and 30 at K through 12.
Oh, good catch, that should be 7 through 12.
Huh?
That should say 7 through
It should
12.
say
Okay,
7
I
through
knew
12.
something was wrong.
Working the bugs out here. It's-
Yeah. I see
Yeah.
it.
Makes a
Exactly,
difference
thank
here,
you.
just let you know.
Remember President Jacobs has his hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Is the evidence-based model referring to the Pike-Azog study we had refreshed, or is that something else?
It is the Pike-Azog study, yeah.
Okay, is there any way to make that evidence-based model class size like a hyperlink someone could click on if they wanted to? Or does the software not allow for that?
I think we might be able to do that.
We'll see. It's not that robust of a software.
And our latest, the study that the board commissioned about 2 years ago is still located on the school board's website via a link. It's a publicly available document.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But think
don't
it's a
know
great
that.
question.
I get
It
folks
might
aren't
not be
gonna know
a
what that
hyperlink,
is.
but we
Yeah.
could
You
have a
could
note
say,
and
if
put
you want
the-
more information,
Right. I mean, there's like a place on here, like you can only put 400 characters in here, but there's another spot where you can add more details to it. You can put hyperlinks in there.
Okay.
So we could do
Thank
it
you.
as part of that.
great question.
But the rest of it is really kind of about the same as we had last year with respect to the different categories and everything. It's just updated for the amounts. The school closures, I'll take out the 3 and 4, but we'll have the 1 and 2 in there because we want to post the 2. But we do still have that. And then the other thing I wanted to change at the bottom was the suggestion and having the amount in there, because that was another place that people kind of took their liberty to put something wild in there and really skew the data. But since every one of our dollars is accounted in these other areas, we may not have them cost field, but we certainly want the feedback, what else we could do. And it might be just in the closing commentary or something, but I kind of wanted to get away from where people can make these things that are going to skew our data sets wildly, depending on what they put
Can
in.
you show us, I know from the time I spent on the board that people are often interested in cutting administration. Is there a way, is that disaggregated? I mean, I saw the $57 million. Okay, so there are
Yeah.
sub area, there are areas that people could toggle within the concept of administration. We had a great work session maybe a couple of years ago on what do we mean by administration?
Yes, because this isn't the definitions of within the state chart of accounts.
Okay,
And particularly within like academic services where most of this falls under instructional, or student support for instruction. In that state function, it would include librarians, it includes the principal supervision, teaching and learning, professional development, all goes into this thing. So we tried to separate it out between more what's in this building versus what is kind of just like direct classroom stuff.
is there?
Although there's this one we need to do some work on too, because it probably has a lot of professional development and addenda that are being paid to staff in schools.
It seems like and I don't know what the product should look like at the end of the day, but if you could help folks, but if you decrease, if you click decrease once on business management, what is there a way for someone to know what that $415,000 would pull off? I mean,
Not a good
or
way.
it would
I
just
mean,
essentially say, hey, we want to shrink this area. There's no way of understanding what the effect of that minus $415,000.
yeah, it doesn't show
would
like
be.
well, and I think that would be a whole lot more detailed conversation on, with all the departments, say, what would you cut if someone decided to cut 50% out of this?
Mhm.
And I'd probably just say for business management, I'd cut myself, go find a new job because we're gonna fail our audits and get taken over by the state.
The thing that's really challenging is that some of those functions we're legally obligated to maintain them.
Right.
At a certain point, we can't cut payroll because we won't be issuing paychecks. So I think that's a hard conversation to suss some of that out because, some of the levels I think we may have already reached at the point where we're starting to push in where it's gonna make it very difficult to maintain some of those legal obligations and things that we're really supposed to be doing. There are a lot of people in these areas within the budget that do required state reporting to put together and compile our financial data so that we can produce a clean audit. And so while there is the ability to cut back on some of these potentially, you're also, I think, it will have an effect to the compliance infrastructure of the district.
And so this is kind of what I wanted to show, like what kind of that secondary level of detail is. So when added to mine, like when you click on the information, it'll give your 400 character thing here. And then it has this more details button that you can put in charts or links into it.
Okay.
So this is just what we put in for business management, kind of the historical staffing change that we've had.
So if somebody was curious and wanted to learn more about the effects or ramifications of their selection, they would have a path to learn.
Yeah, when we do the community event, I think the idea would be to have these departments around there and have little stations they can walk to, have their device and say, what is it you do, and get more details and a better explanation.
Do we have a target date yet for this sort of community event?
I believe we're looking at December 6th.
Okay.
But hopefully I'll have a better.
Yes,
preview.
December 6th. Yes, December 6th.
Thanks, MJ.
Thank you, MJ.
But yeah, hopefully we'll have a better preview by the board meeting on the 4th. And then I would like to go through it with our principals and leadership at their next general leadership meeting to get their take and maybe like even disaggregating these different data sets of what different groups of folks think.
I'm gonna pivot and say the student advisory board may also be a great source of student feedback.
Yeah.
So as the liaison there.
Yeah, if they have a meeting, we can certainly show up to that and let them do the same thing.
Okay. Terrific.
The only thing I was gonna suggest is if there's a way to have the questions and answers type things added as you do it. One of the things that I will say at Alyeska, we did that, but then we were able to ask the questions we wanted them to ask, we could answer it. That's not a bad way, because you've got all kind of informations coming out that you hear about. So it helps diffuse that type of false information about administration. If they come up with something new, we have a chance to respond, rather than leave it to to a couple of people that are very vocal about coming out with facts that they create.
Yeah.
Get disgusting.
Yeah, so if you see anything, if you think anything in the next, after seeing just a very, very brief preview of this, any thoughts you have about from last year? Now, I think we took some notes and made some changes from the last version. But if you think of it, let us know. Happy to
Well,
add more details.
I'm
to
really
it.
appreciative that you're doing this again. And this is the second year that ASD is using this tool. There was a great presentation that Keith Parrott gave the board, sort of processing this information. And Team ASD was commended by the makers of the software for having done a really fantastic job. So I feel like that's important to shout out. So good job. Before we pivot possibly to the ACFR, the one question that I had was about the projected BSA gap for FY27. We've seen some charts.
Oh,
Um,
that's what I forgot to bring. The chart. There is one on the website now, the one, and I think it was the same one that we used in the last work, or we did with the finance committee and with the joint assembly meeting. So
And-
that'll show the BSA and the gap.
And this is, so if we use, so there's a new URL, which is asdk12.org/FY27. Is that what we're referring to? And then it gets longer,
I'm gonna guess.
but if I
so.
tie it in, I mean, I just typed in FY20/FY27.
There's like a hot topics, I think, it'll go to
Okay.
our website.
But it looks like.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
A little over
hot topics.
$1,400 for the
Great, okay, so
gap between the FY11 inflation proof versus
In-
current.
in fact, I see that right there. So if anybody is curious, asdk12.org/FY27, and it shows using this figure from FY11, right, the 2010-2011 school year, which is useful because legislative finance last September identified that as really the last year that the BSA was inflation proof, and so that's the purpose of following FY11 inflation.
I'm gonna have to excuse myself and go to a
okay.
parent teacher conference.
We are right at 2:45. That clock doesn't match this clock.
Yeah,
So maybe we need to adjust
If
timing.
they're like you, I can tell them.
I guess just to
Sure,
put
it's
a
fine.
pin on the ACFR review
That's fine.
process, can you tell us, if there's anything really important that we need to know right now, but my understanding is that the board will review the ACFR in
You will,
upcoming meetings.
yes, November 4th, the auditors will come and discuss it with you.
Okay, so we will have a chance to
Yes,
discuss the
yeah,
audit.
and then we can put this on the meeting for November as well.
Okay, so a
For the
follow-up, we can put this
Yes.
at the top of the finance meeting in November, but it will be, we will begin talking about the ACFR at our public board meeting in about a week.
Yep, correct.
Okay, thank you for patiently sitting
That's
through this
fine.
meeting. I guess it was heftier than I anticipated. We appreciate your time and efforts. With that, we are a little bit late. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions and questions. Our next meeting will be in about a month.
November 20th.
Thank you, on November 20th, at the normal time, 12:15. Sandwiched between governance and communications.
All right.
Thank you.